Welcome, mystic seekers, to Mystic Manor, where history meets mystery. The holidays bring us stories of warmth, magic, and wonder. From tales of snow queens and magical kingdoms to the sweet nostalgia of gingerbread houses have become staples of the holiday season. But what if I told you these cherished tales were inspired by much darker origins? Behind the Nutcracker and the Mouse King, the icy enchantment of the Snow Queen, and the disturbing story of Hansel and Gretel, beneath their festive sparkle lies a dark history, one born from fear, struggle, and the darker side of folklore. What has been lost in their transformations into cheerful holiday staples? And what truths have been hidden, waiting for us to rediscover? Today, we'll uncover the unsettling origins behind these stories, and you may never see your favorite holiday traditions the same way again. The 19th century was a golden age for fairy tales. But these stories weren't the light-hearted fables we know today. They were born in a world of hardship, deeply tied to societal fears and moral lessons. Romanticism, the cultural movement that celebrated emotion, imagination, and the supernatural, played a pivotal role in this transformation. Writers like the Grimm brothers dedicated themselves to preserving German folklore, creating Grimm's fairy tales in 1812. Originally known as the Children's and Household Tales, the brothers Grimm, Jacob, and Wilhelm published 210 stories in their final edition of Grimm's Fairy Tales, a collection meant to safeguard cultural identity during a time of rapid modernization. Across Europe, others like Hans Christian Andersen, who gave us timeless tales such as The Little Mermaid, and E.T.A. Hoffman wove their own stories inspired by both folklore and personal experiences. This golden age was also fueled by advances in printing technology, making books more accessible than ever. Collections of fairy tales, like those by the Grimms and Andersen, were translated into multiple languages, ensuring their stories reached audiences far beyond their origins. Romanticism shaped these stories, blending beauty with terror and the age-old battle between good and evil. It was this contrast that made the 19th century a golden age for fairy tales, one that left a legacy still felt in today's holiday traditions. One of the most striking examples of this era is Hans Christian Andersen's The Snow Queen, a tale of icy isolation, emotional manipulation, and the enduring power of love. Andersen's original tale delves into much darker themes, exploring the struggle to overcome cold-heartedness and the loss of innocence. What inspired this haunting story, and how did it evolve into the cheerful magic we know today? Born in Denmark in 1805, Hans Christian Andersen grew up in poverty. He was the son of a shoemaker and a washerwoman, and his childhood was filled with loneliness and ridicule. These experiences deeply influenced his stories, especially The Snow Queen, which explores themes of rejection and emotional isolation. Published in 1844, The Snow Queen is a 7-part epic. It is one of Andersen's longest and most intricate fairy tales. The story begins with an evil troll, often interpreted as the devil, creating a magical mirror. This cursed mirror distorts reality, magnifying ugliness and erasing beauty. Its purpose is to spread misery and amplify human flaws. The mirror eventually shatters, scattering shards across the world. These shards lodge in people's hearts and eyes, turning them cold and cruel. The rest of the story follows Kai and Gerda, who are best friends that live next door to each other. They share a deep, innocent friendship and often play together in Gerda's grandmother's beautiful garden. One day, shards of the cursed mirror lodge in Kay's heart and eyes. His vision becomes distorted and his heart grows cold. He becomes mean and dismissive of Gerda, no longer enjoying the things they used to love. One winter day, Kai is playing outside when the Snow Queen, a mysterious and beautiful figure, appears. She enchants him with her cold kiss and takes him to her frozen palace in the far north. In her icy kingdom, Kai forgets about Gerda and his old life, succumbing to the Snow Queen's emotional manipulation. She tasks him with solving a puzzle, arranging ice shards into the word eternity to keep his mind occupied. Determined to save her friend, Gerda embarks on a perilous journey to find Kay. Along the way, she encounters several characters who aid her. The old woman with the garden of eternal summer. She tries to make Gerda forget Kai because she always wanted a daughter, so she doesn't want Gerda to leave. But Gerda's love and determination overpower the enchantment. The crow and his fiancée. They guide Gerda to a palace where they mistakenly believe Kai is living. The robber girl, a fierce young girl who befriends Gerda and helps her continue her quest. After befriending Gerda, the robber girl gives her a reindeer named Bay to help her travel north to find Kai. She instructs the reindeer to take Gerda to Lapland, where a wise woman might offer guidance. The reindeer carries Gerda to a small house in Lapland, where the Lapland woman gives her shelter and advice. The Lapland woman writes a letter on a dried fish and tells the reindeer to take Gerda even further north to meet the Finland woman, who might have the knowledge to guide her closer to Kai. Gerda and the reindeer travel to Finland, where they meet the Finland woman in her warm, humble home. The Finn woman explains that the Snow Queen's castle lies far to the north, deep in the icy wilderness. When the reindeer asks if the Finland woman can give Gerda magical powers to help her defeat the Snow Queen, she responds that Gerda's greatest power is her love and innocence, which will melt Kai's frozen heart. The reindeer takes Gerda as far as it can, leaving her near the Snow Queen's palace. The final leg of the journey is one Gerda must face alone. Gerda trudges through the snowy wasteland, enduring the cold and harsh conditions, guided only by her determination to save Kai. Gerda finally reaches the Snow Queen's palace. Despite the icy, hostile environment, her love for Kai keeps her going. She finds Kai sitting frozen and emotionless, unable to solve the Snow Queen's puzzle. Gerda's tears melt the ice in Kai's heart, and her love breaks the curse. The shards of the mirror are expelled from his heart and eyes, and he remembers her and their childhood. Gerda and Kai return home, where they find that they have grown older, but their bond remains intact. The story ends on a hopeful note, emphasizing the triumph of love and innocence over coldness and cruelty. The Snow Queen's control over Kai reflects toxic relationships where individuals lose themselves to coldness and detachment. The Snow Queen's lack of malice makes her different from other fairy tale villains. She isn't an evil witch or cruel stepmother. Instead, she's more like a force of nature, beautiful, cold, and untouchable. Anderson leaves much of her character open to interpretation, making her one of the most fascinating and mysterious figures in folklore. Her ice palace and eternal winter reflect loneliness and the cost of shutting oneself off from the world. The Snow Queen embodies winter's beauty and danger, dazzling to behold, but deadly to those who linger too long. Kai's transformation from loving and kind to cruel and detached reflects the loss of innocence and the harsh realities of growing up. Disney loosely adapted The Snow Queen for Frozen, but the plot and characters were significantly altered. Anderson's original story continues to inspire darker, more faithful adaptations, such as operas, animated films, and literary retellings, but early adaptations focused on its darker, allegorical elements, preserving its legacy as a story about breaking free from manipulation and emotional control, the relentless power of love, and the inevitability of growing up. Born in 1776 in Prussia, Ernst Theodor Amadeus Hoffmann was a writer, composer, and artist fascinated by the supernatural. His works often blurred the lines between reality and fantasy, and his story, The Nutcracker and the Mouse King, is no exception. Published in 1816, Hoffmann's story is far darker than the ballet it inspired. The story begins at a Christmas Eve party hosted by the Stahlbaum family. Young Marie Stahlbaum, Clara in later versions, and her siblings are given gifts by their mysterious godfather, Drosselmeyer, a toy maker and inventor. Among the toys is an odd-looking Nutcracker doll. Marie feels an immediate affection for the Nutcracker, while her brother Fritz accidentally damages it. That night, Marie sneaks downstairs to check on the Nutcracker. At midnight, she is startled when the toys come to life, and an army of mice, led by the sinister Mouse King with 7 heads, invades the room. The Nutcracker, leading the toy soldiers, fights the Mouse King and his army. Despite his bravery, the Nutcracker appears to be losing. Marie, in a moment of courage, throws her shoe at the Mouse King. This distracts the Mouse King, allowing the Nutcracker to escape. After the battle, Drosselmeyer reveals the Nutcracker's origins. The Nutcracker was once a young man, cursed by the Mouse Queen after he broke a spell that she placed on her own daughter. He was turned into the wooden Nutcracker, his features twisted and grotesque. The curse could only be broken if he defeated the Mouse King and was loved despite his appearance. In the days that follow, the Mouse King continues to menace the Nutcracker and Marie, demanding sweets and treasures in exchange for sparing the Nutcracker's life. Marie complies, giving up her toys and treats to appease the Mouse King. After days of tension, the Nutcracker finally confronts the Mouse King in a decisive battle from a sword given by Marie. This time, the Nutcracker emerges victorious, killing the Mouse King. After defeating the Mouse King and earning Marie's love and loyalty, the Nutcracker is transformed back into a handsome young prince. Marie is shown the wonders of the Nutcracker's kingdom, the land of dolls, where he reigns as a prince. She is welcomed warmly and celebrated for her bravery and kindness. In the land of dolls, the Nutcracker formally proposes to Marie, asking her to become his queen. She agrees, and it's implied that she stays there with him. After the adventure with the Nutcracker and the Mouse King, Marie returned to her normal life at home. The fantastical events seem to fade into the background, though they still hold a special place in her heart. Not long after she returns from the land of the dolls, Marie is visited by the nephew of Drosselmeyer. This nephew is revealed to be the true identity of the Nutcracker, now fully freed from his curse. The nephew proposes to Marie, mirroring the fantastical proposal in the land of dolls. the story ends ambiguously, leaving readers uncertain whether Marie's adventure was a dream or a reality. In some versions, Marie marries the Nutcracker, now returned to human form, and they live happily ever after in the land of dolls. As enchanting as Hoffman's The Nutcracker and the Mouse King is, there's a detail in the original story that raises eyebrows today. The significant age difference between Marie, who is just 7 years old, and the Nutcracker, who is a grown man. Large age gaps in marriages were not uncommon at the time, though these typically occurred between young women, not children and older men. The idea of a 7-year-old marrying would have been inappropriate even then, but the fantasy setting of the story allowed for suspension of real-world social rules. It's no surprise that later adaptations, like the famous Nutcracker Ballet, chose to reinterpret the story, often portraying the Nutcracker as closer in age to Marie, or Clara, as she's called in the ballet, shifting their relationship to one of childlike wonder rather than romance. This change has allowed the evolution of the story to turn into a beloved holiday classic without the uncomfortable undertones of the original tale. The story explores themes of bravery, loyalty, and love, overcoming appearances. French writer Alexandre Dumas adapted Hoffman's story in the mid-19th century, simplifying its darker elements and focusing on whimsy and charm. Dumas' version was lighter and more child-friendly, paving the way for Tchaikovsky's adaptation. The ballet, The Nutcracker, debuted in 1892 in Russia, choreographed by Marius Petipa and Lev Ivanov, with music by Pyotr Ilyich Tchaikovsky. It softened Hoffman's darker themes, removing the curse and focusing on the magical journey to the land of sweets. Marie became Clara, a more generic and relatable heroine. The Mouse King's grotesque traits were toned down, and the battle became more fantastical than frightening. The land of dolls became the land of sweets, emphasizing whimsy and delight. The focus shifted to festive, dazzling dances, such as the iconic dance of the Sugar Plum Fairy. The ballet became a Christmas staple in the mid-20th century, particularly in the United States, where annual performances turned it into a symbol of holiday magic. The dark, psychological themes of Hoffman's tale were largely forgotten in favor of Tchaikovsky's enchanting music and festive imagery. Today, the Nutcracker is associated with joy, magic, and nostalgia. The original darkness, grotesque curses, and ambiguous reality is rarely emphasized in modern retellings. While tales like The Nutcracker and the Snow Queen dealt with themes of emotional isolation and transformation, Hansel and Gretel took a far more visceral approach, confronting the terror of famine, abandonment, and survival in a harsh, unforgiving world. In the early 19th century, families across Europe faced periods of famine and poverty. Tales like Hansel and Gretel emerged as reflections of these struggles, warning children of the dangers lurking beyond the safety of home. First published in 1812, it tells the story of two siblings abandoned in the woods by their starving parents, driven by desperation and the manipulative convincing of his wife. The father makes the heartbreaking decision to abandon Hansel and Gretel. When Hansel and Gretel are abandoned in the forest, Hansel cleverly uses breadcrumbs to mark their path back home. Unfortunately, birds eat the crumbs, leaving the children lost. Lost and hungry, they stumble upon a house made of bread, cake, and sugar, only to discover that it belongs to a witch who plans to eat them. After being lured into the witch's candy house, Hansel is locked in a cage, and Gretel is forced to work as the witch's servant. The witch plans to fatten Hansel before cooking him. Hansel cleverly deceives the witch by holding out a chicken bone instead of his finger when she checks his weight. The nearly blind witch assumes he is still too thin to eat. When the witch grows impatient and decides to cook Hansel anyway, she orders Gretel to check if the oven is hot enough. Sensing an opportunity, Gretel pretends she doesn't understand how to check the oven. When the witch leans in to demonstrate, Gretel pushes her into the blazing oven and slams the door shut. With the witch defeated, the siblings search the house and discover her treasure hoard, including jewels and gold. They fill their pockets and return home, where they reunite with their father and live in prosperity. In many versions of the story, the mother or stepmother dies, while Hansel and Gretel are lost in the forest. The Grimms do not specify how she dies, but it is often implied that her death is connected to her greed and cruelty. In the 19th and 20th centuries, as fairy tales became targeted toward children, darker themes like parental abandonment were downplayed or softened in retellings. The story's moral elements, courage, cleverness, and the triumph of good over evil were emphasized instead. The imagery of the witch's candy house, once a sinister lure, evolved into a charming holiday tradition. Gingerbread houses became associated with Christmas in Germany in the early 19th century, particularly after the popularization of the Grimm's tale. By the mid-20th century, this tradition spread internationally. The tale is often adapted into light-hearted plays, ballets, and films, reinforcing its association with festive seasons like Christmas. The candy-covered gingerbread house became a centerpiece of Christmas decorations and festivities, particularly in Western cultures. As a result, Hansel and Gretel's sinister origins were overshadowed by the cheerful imagery of sugar-coated holiday cheer. The story reflects the harsh realities of 19th century Europe, where famine and poverty often drove families to desperate measures. At its core, Hansel and Gretel is about survival in an unforgiving world, where even the sweetest temptation can hide mortal danger. It's strange, isn't it? How the stories we cherish most, the ones that bring us comfort during the holidays, were once meant to warn us, to reflect our fears, and to guide us through life's harshest lessons. Yet somehow, they've transformed into something magical, something we hold close, not because they're perfect, but because they remind us of what it means to endure, to love, and to have hope. Maybe that's what makes them so timeless. Beneath the glittering lights and cheerful music, there's always something deeper, a dark truth, or a lesson waiting to be learned. And maybe that's what keeps us coming back year after year. The possibility of discovering something else, even in the stories we thought we knew so well. I hope you're staying cozy and feeling the warmth this holiday season. As for me, let's just say the cold never really bothered me much anyway. Thank you for joining me for this story. Until next time, stay mystical. If you've made it this far and enjoyed the video, don't forget to give it a like. It really helps spread awareness about the channel. I have 2 questions this time. Which fairy tale is your all-time favorite? And which fairy tale or myth do you think is the darkest? I'd love to hear your thoughts for inspiration to feature some of them in future videos. If you're not already a mystic seeker, be sure to subscribe and join our growing community of seekers as we uncover the mysteries of dark history and legend. See you next week.